Good morning, and welcome to the very first Bush Heritage Science Careers for Change event. My name is Alicia Van Eyck, and I am part of the Bush Heritage Seeding the Future team, and I will be your host today. The Seeding the Future team is dedicated to offering aspiring conservationists pathways into the sector and providing opportunities to learn and hone best practice skills and approaches. I'm so excited to be here with you all today and joined by hundreds of students from all corners of Australia to learn about what careers in the conservation sector look like post study. I am calling in from Wurundjeri country today in Victoria, and I would like to recognise the traditional custodians and respect the enduring relationships they have with the land and waters, and I pay respects to the elders past and present. As we dial in from many places across the country today, I would like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we each join in on and extend this to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers of this event. This is the first year we are running this event, and we are here as we know it can be hard navigating and answering the what's next question after finishing your course. Well, we believe it's beneficial to ask, what change do you want to make in your career? And how do you want to feel every day whilst at work to help navigate this space? To instill hope in you all, green jobs are increasing. As the focus on conservation and sustainability grows, we take on challenges to tackle climate change. This means for you, it's an exciting time to be thinking about what's for you and what do you want to do, and to be looking at careers in the conservation sector. So, how does Bush Heritage fit into this all? Well, we are a leading not for profit conservation organisation that protects ecosystems and wildlife across the continent. We use best practice science, conservation, and right way knowledge to deliver landscape scale impact. But we always need more people to do this work. In mid 2022, our organisation received generous support from the Vincent Fairfax Family Foundation, who are equally passionate about getting young people into green careers, and they've helped us set up the Seeding the Future program. What we offer are paid internships, student placement opportunities, and also PhD researcher opportunities to help answer the knowledge gaps that are in our organisation. And we are very grateful to the donors who help make this all possible as well. So, the conservation sector includes many other organisations, such as Greening Australia, Australian Wildlife Conservancy, Arid Recovery, and more locally, your Landcare networks. You'll hear our presenters talk today about the volunteering opportunities they took part in both Australia and overseas. And this is a fantastic way to develop your skills and knowledge and put yourself in opportunities that you never knew existed. It might help you set your career path as well. We recommend getting on our website or any other organisation of interest and give the volunteer management team a call to see what your options are there. Our sector is so diverse, you never know what might be on offer. So, today we're going to meet three Bush Heritage staff members who have developed careers in the conservation and environmental sector. They're going to give you a really good indication of what it means to work in our sector and also the twists and turns and the pathways that have led them to where they are today. Now, before we meet our first presenter, just a little bit of housekeeping. We, like you, are joining from all corners of Australia, and some of us are quite remote, so at times the internet might be a bit dodgy. If this happens, please be patient, but we will come back online as soon as possible. Just bear with us. The format of this morning is that we'll hear from our three presenters, throughout which I ask that you please add some questions into the Q&A, and then we'll have a full 20 minutes of question and answer time to the three Bush Heritage staff, and hopefully we can get through as many of those as possible. So please keep those good questions coming in as we go. Alrighty, let's meet our first presenter. I'd like to introduce you to Reese. Reese is the Bush Heritage National Fire Program Manager. Reese started his career after completing a marine science and management degree. Reese has worked across different areas of Australia and throughout his journey focusing his career on supporting fire management activities. Reese has dedicated the last 4 years to a national role across Bush Heritage's reserves and partnerships. So, welcome, Reese. Please take it away.
Good morning. Thanks, Alicia. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's certainly great to be here today. Uh, Firstly, I'd just like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of where we're all calling in from today. And I pay my respects to the elders, past and present. For me, I'm here up on Jabbergai country up in far north Queensland. And so, as Alicia said, my name is Reese Swain. I'm the National Fire Program Manager for Bush Heritage Australia. I'll get to that role a little bit later down the presentation, but for now, I thought I would just start from the start where it all began for me. In my childhood, and I spent my childhood up on the Atherton Tablelands, west of Cairns. Spent many days sort of roaming the creeks and rivers on canoes and rafts with my brothers and some of the neighbourhood kids out in nature. And we also would be helping my dad around the farm with all sorts of jobs like fencing and mustering, spraying weeds, burning, and also putting out the occasional bushfire. And little did I know at the time, but all of these odd jobs that I was doing would help lead me to a career in conservation and land management. And other parts of my childhood was spent around camping spots, fishing, snorkeling, somewhere in far north Queensland, and usually had a bit of a saltwater theme. So I knew I was always interested in that marine space, that coastal space. But yeah, it was a great upbringing, and I really enjoyed it, and it sort of led me to that deciding to go and finish a bachelor's degree in applied science, but focusing on marine science and management. Uh, so, following completing university, finding employment in the area that I studied was difficult. And looking back, I was probably aiming way too high for the experience that I actually had. It's a common thing when you leave university, aiming probably way too high than where you're actually at. But I decided to overcome that I would further my practical experience. And as I was focused on the marine environment at the time, I thought, hey, let's get a job driving boats, working on dive operations, and doing some guiding. And I started a dive master traineeship with a Cairns-based dive reef trip. During the traineeship, they didn't really pay as much at all. It was more of a, hey, here you go, here's this experience, and the money wasn't really there as the carrot to entice people into the traineeship at all. But across the 5 months of the traineeship, I built up a bunch of sea time and a whole bunch of dives, and I came out with a dive master qualification. And I also went back to school and did my coxswain certificate, which is a certificate for in transport and distribution, I believe they called it back in the day. And that allowed me to drive a vessel, like a commercial vessel, up to 12 meters, which was something that I was really keen to get involved in. But it was during my medical exam for my coxswain certificate that my doctor let me know that I was colorblind. And it turns out that, when you're driving boats at night time, it's really important to be color proficient, being able to see all those red and green and yellow and white lights out there at sea. It's a very important part of the qualification. So I realised, hey, that's probably going to be a bit of a roadblock for me, and I needed to pursue some options that are a bit more focused on what I'd studied. So that was probably the early parts of my career. I was still wasn't 100% certain on exactly what I wanted to do. And so I took the opportunity to sort of start heading north through Queensland. I had a couple of small stints in Arakoon, which is an Aboriginal community on the Western Cape of Cape York. And we were there working around on a small vessel doing some wetland tours and some fishing guiding for high-end sort of tourism operations. Tourists. And then it sort of led me further north up into the Torres Strait. And while I was up there, I noticed that there was a job advertised for a community development focused role. And it was all around coastal management. And I got very excited for it. And I applied for it and I was successful. And this was the real start for my role working with, traditional owners, working to sort of improve conditions out in those communities Uh, there's obviously a lot of saltwater ingress and coastal erosion issues throughout the Torres Strait, and so we were working with the community organisations to sort of remedy some of those coastal management issues. Obviously, there's much bigger things at play in some of those parts of the country, but it was really great to hear firsthand how this global issue was affecting the livelihoods of these small remote communities throughout the north of the country. Um, the other part of that role was around developing community gardens. There was a big push for healthy living, healthy lifestyles throughout the Torres Strait. And like most of regional Australia, especially regional Australian Aboriginal communities, fresh food, availability of fresh food is a real issue. But they've got the most amazing soils in places and you can grow absolutely anything. So we set up a bunch of community gardens. I think we built about 6 or 7 across the time that I was there. A few of them are still running today, and it was a really fulfilling experience getting to spend time out on those beautiful islands. Uh, it wasn't long after that I noticed there was a job that came up over in the Kimberley, which hadn't been over that way. And it always had appealed to me to travel over to Western Australia and explore that part of the country. And there was a job that was going with the Gurrajuddy Rangers, who are actually one of our partners at Bush Heritage at the moment. It's great to still work with them. So I applied for a job as a ranger coordinator in a little town called Bidjadanga, south of Broome, about 2 hours south of Broome. I was successful for that role, and here I led a team of 12 men and women Indigenous rangers with their work plan, addressing targets that were outlined in the Healthy Country Plan. The work was awesome. We got to travel all the way through the Great Sandy Desert. It was quite varied, the work. Like one day we'd be setting cat traps or fencing off a spring. Sometimes we'd take the school kids out to a special spot down on the coastline for a holiday excursion. And it was here during that role that I really rekindled some of those childhood skills that I'd developed and practiced with my dad many years ago, and particularly working with fire. To the Gurrajuddy, fire is such an important tool, but it also represents a threat to their targets and to their country. And we would spend many weeks from sort of March to June each year putting in small burns around specific sites, maybe a cultural site um, or an outstation where someone lives. And then we'd also step up into much larger landscape scale prescribed burning using aircraft in the northern Great Sandy Desert. And here, that's where I learned a lot of the practices around cultural fire. When is the right time to light up? What are the objectives? What are we trying to do with this burning practice? And after that job, I applied for a job with the Kimberley Land Council, specific in the fire sector or supporting other ranger groups across the Kimberley and their PBCs to reach their healthy country goals as well. It was a fair bit of it was around carbon and reducing emissions from bushfires. And we'd spend about 300 hours a year in a helicopter flying around, putting in landscape scale breaks all the way across the Kimberley, and then also going and putting out big bushfires later in the season when they would kick off. I'm just sorry, I forgot I was meant to be scrolling through my slides as well. So yeah, here we got to do lots of different aerial work, and it was through this work that we got to go and visit some amazing spots. We'd always have elders with us, and we got to visit some spots that I'm sure had never been visited for many years. And we got to record where these locations are, and I'm talking like really important cultural sites, art sites, burial sites, things that may have been forgotten with time, but we were able to get back out there and access this country. Obviously, it's very remote. There's no roads, so a lot of it was through remote access through aircraft. We also had some major fires to deal with in this job. There was one in particular, they call it the Gibb Complex fire, where everyone was involved, all the landowners, many different ranger groups, the government was there. It was a big fire. It took out about 1.6 million hectares of bush, which, in one event, it can't keep happening at that scale. And we spent about 2.5 months putting that fire out, believe it or not. You probably wouldn't hear about it on the news too much because no big cities were affected, but it certainly was a major part of of dealing with fires up in that region. After I after I left the Kimberley, I spent a 12-month project. I did a 12-month project working with Bushfires NT, which is the Rural Fire Service in the Northern Territory. Here I developed a risk assessment for all of the remote Aboriginal communities across the NT, and it turns out there's 768 of them. So we developed a tool for the Rural Fire Service to be able to identify and mitigate the risk of bushfires. So I've got to travel around quite a bit and identify what are those contributing factors to bushfire risk, and also what are the treatments in place that can help mitigate the risk, and how do we improve them and have some better collaboration. And then I applied for a job with Bush Heritage, and to be honest, it's been an amazing last 4 years that I've been working here. We've got a very sort of broad footprint across the country, so dealing with fire at a national scale is something that I hadn't really thought of before. But you take it on, you get to understand the bush, the different types of vegetation at each one of our reserves and our partnerships, and you get to understand what are those fire requirements for that type of bush. We get to work with some amazing people. Still very fortunate to work with a lot of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in my role in our partnership space. But as a result, there's lots of travel all the way around the country. We develop like a reserve scale fire management plans, and we implement prescribed burn programs all the way across the country. Another big part of the role is to manage the risk of the activity. Obviously, setting fire to the bush can be a risky sort of part-time, not only for our workers, but also for the organisation. So we've developed a really thorough framework for reducing the risk of that activity. But the other part of the role is supporting bushfire suppression. So when part of owning land in the bush is that you've got to deal with the fire risk, and obviously there's been a bit of an increase in fire danger days across the country, and we're no exception. We've had some major fires to deal with in the last few years that I've been working with the organisation. But the main sort of key takeaway from my little talk today is definitely don't let your comfort zones hold you back. Just because something may be foreign or some long way away and you're not familiar with it, my advice is just embrace it, back yourself, and go forth and see what happens out there in other parts of the country. If it wasn't for the decision for me to go out bush and explore, then I wouldn't be where I am today. The other really important point that I want you to take away from this chat is, and I haven't written on the screen, but maintain your contacts, maintain your networks. A lot of the jobs that I've heard about over the years, they weren't on your typical platforms like Seek or NRM jobs. They were through sort of word of mouth. And so if you don't maintain your networks, you may miss out on some of those opportunities. But I really wish you all the best, though, in your as you pursue a career in conservation. It's been one of the most rewarding things I could ever have done, and I'm so grateful for all the opportunities that have presented themselves across the journey of my career. But I thought that was probably where I would leave it today, and I hope you've enjoyed my chat. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Reese, for sharing your journey with us and those tips to embrace, like getting out of your comfort zone and taking up opportunities to move for work. So thank you for that. Just to our audience, please don't forget to keep adding your questions into the Q&A chat as they come to mind as our presenters speak. All right, we're going to welcome our next speaker, Vicky. Vicky is a Yuin Walbunja Marramarung Wiradjuri woman and is one of Bush Heritage's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnership managers. Vicky's career has seen her work with many different organisations such as New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife, catchment management authorities, and in heritage consultancy supporting Aboriginal communities towards culturally led conservation practices. We look forward to hearing more about your career journey and path after your study at Charles Sturt University. Now over to you, Vicky.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I'd just like to say Wadu Ninyuan. Hello, everybody. That's in my local Durga language. So I'm on the south coast of New South Wales on my mother's ancestral country. Um, to start off with, I've had a career pathway of over 25 years now working in conservation and Aboriginal heritage. My background with my family was what actually was the sort of turning or starting point that awoke that interest and that early love of nature from a really young age. My mother's one of 10 children, so grew up in a really large Aboriginal family, spent a lot of time on country with my grandparents as well. And my grandparents were from that earlier time frame where they had seen substantial changes and shifts to Aboriginal rights and access to lands. So, as a child, my love of my culture and the love of country was what led me on this pathway. So, I was fortunate enough having that foundation as a young child. Always knew that I wanted to be a ranger and get into conservation. My dream job was to get into New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service. So, from a young age, I actually took that journey of making sure that I selected science-based subjects going through high school, knowing that I would need a degree to go into that line of work. So from there, completed year 12. I was actually the third member of my family to complete year 12 from my generational group. So from there, I went on to moving 7 hours off country away from home. So that was quite a challenge, and it's something that is something that impacts a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the challenge of actually having to leave home, your country, your familiarity, your family to undertake those higher tertiary qualifications. So moving down to Albury Wodonga, I actually started off undertaking at La Trobe University was my first offer for university studies, and I started environmental management and ecology. After 2 years, realised pretty quickly that that actually wasn't the area that I wanted to be in. Had some advice from other Aboriginal support people at the time that were at the facility who suggested that I change my study direction and actually move over into a Bachelor of Applied Science with Charles Sturt University, undertaking parks, recreation and heritage. That's a degree that was specifically suited and designed for those type of outcomes to do ranger type based work. So from there, completed another year and a half and then was able to move home. My major was in cultural resource management at that time. I had initially, like a lot of other people, gone home with a degree and faced with then the difficulty of not having any field-based experience. And I was fortunate enough again that there was through networks talking with people in my community, there had been an Aboriginal identified job that had been advertised some 6 months prior to me going home. So I took a chance, went into the local National Parks and Wildlife Office and actually introduced myself, said that I was looking for work. And at that time, it was a turning point where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the science sector was starting to just first come into demand. So from that, I started straight away, walked into an employed position working as an interpretation officer. And that led on to other types of roles and work where I went into ranger work and then actually stepped over into the former Cultural Heritage Division and was an Aboriginal Heritage and Conservation Officer in that area, and also dabbled in some other project work along the line. So that's where the basis of some of my skill sets then became a little bit more concrete, utilising the studies, but also starting to get that ground experience working with communities and some pretty dynamic individuals back in the day that had already been within those sort of science sectors and departments spanning 35 to 40 years sort of career. So I had those individuals that supported me, started to take opportunities in field-based work through that. That also led on to other positions, as Alicia mentioned, so other government work, catchment management authorities, which is now known as the Local Land Services in New South Wales, doing consultant type work as well around oral histories, cultural heritage mapping, protection of sites, mitigation, also working closely with anthropologists and archaeologists. That then led into a career pathway with Bush Heritage Australia. Some of the opportunities as well that came up along the way was having opportunities to be selected out of a number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people around Australia to go and undertake Indigenous leadership with the Australian Indigenous Leadership Centre. So again, developing types of skill sets that were relevant to the type of the work that we do. Also undertaking basic archaeology and also being trained in the identification and protection of ancestral remains in that kind of context. So field opportunities were a really big thing. They're one of those areas that I can't encourage enough. Please don't be disheartened. I know it can be challenging. There were other instances where I did volunteer work on the side, working within wildlife sanctuaries and places like that, just again to get a little bit of a background and further skill sets that would then obviously enhance the work that I would be doing later on. Another element I wanted to kind of talk about as well was I can't stress enough the importance of surrounding yourself as well with really good mentors. Mentors in a professional capacity can help you, further develop skill sets, provide guidance, advice, support. So again, I look back on my previous workplaces. There've been some amazing people that to this day still foster and encourage the work that I do. There's a couple of photos there up on the slides where there's some of that early work. I worked in high performance teams where, again, with those knowledgeable types of people and individuals who had extensive knowledge of particular areas, whether they worked in botany, ornithology, fire kind of backgrounds, cultural heritage, tree expertise, all of those types of elements help with the foundation of developing my skill sets to where I am today. Some of the challenges as well was also, of course, looking at in over 25 years now, technology has become one of the largest areas that I can see has developed. So I'd like to strongly encourage that, people keep up to date with those types of advancements as time goes by, because technology changes quite rapidly. And I reflect on, when I first started even my career with New South Wales Parks, we were back in those days using topographic maps. We didn't have all the GPS navigational tools and systems that are in place now. Often our spotlighting surveys were, really good field-based work where we were actually out in the field listening, walking through for hours on end, surveying nocturnal species, making observations. Whereas now we have a tendency where, drone technology and things like that are starting to come forward. They obviously offer a lot of value to the work that we can do on country, but at the same time, I think that it's quite interesting to see the changes that have happened in that time frame and how different things were done, even just in the last 20 years compared to where we're at today. So all of those types of values and having those opportunities are really, really important. And I understand that it can be difficult for some people going into the field. Conservation, as it was stated before by Reese, is a highly competitive field. But with the wake of climate change at the moment and something that impacts everybody on a global scale, First Nations knowledge and people are in demand at this point in time. So that provides a lot of opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia to be able to get into this industry. And it's certainly very rewarding. It's something that comes back to our cultural, inherent values that are instilled in us within our families and our communities. So we have an opportunity here to make some really valuable contributions and, of course, work alongside scientists to collaborate on those Indigenous and Western science knowledge systems. At Bush Heritage, we talk about the right way approach in terms of science, and it's something that, has given us some amazing opportunities. So, just like to encourage that, all the best to everybody, that you move with the times, keep an open mind, surround yourself with good mentors and people that will help you strive to achieve what you want to do, and constantly keep looking. So I'll hand that back to Alicia now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vicky, for sharing your journey and experiences. And thank you for touching on the importance of having good mentors around you and the importance of getting that practical experience after a degree, which we'll touch on a little bit more in our Q&A. But thank you. Okay, now I'm going to introduce our final speaker, and that is Felicity. She is Bush Heritage's Special Wildlife Reserve and Project Officer. Felicity holds an honours in geographical science and has worked in the environmental sector in project management, ecology, and GIS. Felicity works with Bush Heritage to ensure our properties are protected in perpetuity and can never be impacted by mining, logging, or commercial grazing. Without further ado, it's over to you, Felicity. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me today. I think my screen should be appearing to share shortly that I can see. Yep, there we go. So thanks for having me. I just wanted to have a bit of a chat about my experience in this space. I know that it's incredibly hard as a young conservation aspired person to find job security, employment, and passion in this career space. So I thought I would talk to you about my journey, and hopefully it might help some people with a little bit about what options they might have. But first of all, as others have said, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the places in which we work. Today, I'm coming to you from Jagera, Yugarapul and Turrbal land in Brisbane. So my journey in this space was quite confused. I left high school and tried to think about what did I want to study. And the way I went about it is to start with what I liked, because I didn't really have a career in mind. I knew that I liked mountains and trees and plants and deserts and the environment. I liked animals. I liked reading about adventures and I liked having them. I liked working with people and having positive impacts on places. And I liked travel. So that was the sort of themes that I took to trying to choose a degree that satisfied those, with no real idea in mind about what kind of job I would get at the end of it, which definitely stressed me out. But the question about what should I study, I really didn't know. And you know what? To a certain extent, it hasn't actually mattered what I studied. My undergraduate degree, I did a Bachelor of Arts in honours in geographical science and Spanish, because I knew that I liked Spanish, I liked to travel, and I liked the environment and geography. And then I did a master's, honours degree in straight geographical science, where I studied paleo-environmental reconstruction of the patterned fens on K'gari, which was a very obscure topic, but looking at past climate change environments. So I've got a little map here to kind of talk through my journey and to try and impress upon you that I've had many crisis moments about what I do and where I want to go. And also things are definitely not linear. So I finished school and I didn't know what to do. I had a crisis moment. I knew I liked to travel, so I started there. I worked part-time in a bakery, earning $7 an hour to fund my ticket to Central America. And I spent 6 months over there volunteering, working in national parks, trekking, having lots of fun. And that really inspired me to want to learn Spanish. And then I started university and had another crisis about what I want to actually study. And I knew I liked Spanish from my year off, and I knew I liked geography. So they were the degrees that I chose. That led me to have a semester abroad in Mexico, which I managed to fund with a travel scholarship from UQ Abroad. And I spent 6 months in a university studying Mexican history, Mexican culture, all sorts of things like that. I saved up all my electives from my degree and used them over there. It was brilliant, and it introduced me really into the passion field of conservation over there. We did a lot of working with communities about environmental problems that were faced by different communities, and that really ignited a passion in me. I then came back to Australia and did my honours thesis on K'gari, which introduced me to the sort of research element that you can do with a conservation degree. And I toyed with ideas about doing a PhD with that, but decided against that, and decided to see if I could go and work in Central America again. So I applied to multiple different not-for-profits to see if I could get a position working in the environmental sector in Central America. I funded this by having 2 jobs in Australia before I left. I taught, did tutoring at a university, and I worked as a medical receptionist, and I saved up all my money, and then I went and didn't earn any money for a year, basically. I volunteered. My positions were funded with food and accommodation, but not pay. And I worked on a fisheries and turtle project in Guatemala. So I used my Spanish, which was great. We were doing observer work with rays and sharks, going out with fishermen, seeing what they caught, taking DNA samples. And that was all organised through a very small not-for-profit that I managed to find that worked over there, that were doing a big research project with the University of Exeter. So it seems a bit sort of random from Australia, but it was a wonderful experience. Then I came home. I had another crisis because I'd just spent, all this time volunteering, and I really needed a proper job, but was very daunted at that point by the jobs market. There was still very little security in what you could find in terms of employment for early career conservationists. So I did some volunteer work with the Nature Conservancy. So they're a big not-for-profit. I used my mapping skills that I had learnt at university to do GIS work for them. And through them, through word of mouth, I got my first job, starting off as a casual with the Queensland Trust for Nature. So it was a huge win for me to start that job. And that job really was the springboard for everything that I have been able to do since. The job had huge variety. We were a very small team, and so I got exposure to policy about nature, covenanting, protecting land. I got exposure into land management, threatened species management and monitoring, getting out there, putting out wildlife cameras, and I got really interested in fire ecology. So I did quite a lot of work with a fireland consultancy, and I decided that I really wanted to increase my skills in this place. So I took some paid leave from my job at the trust, and I used it to work for Fireland for a couple of months to get some better skills. And then I continued doing that on and off every time I had a bit of leave. And I wanted to earn a bit more money, I would go and work for Fireland doing contract burning for them, which gave me a lot more skill in this area. Then I went on parental leave. I had a baby, and I had to figure out how to do career and parenting. And so after my baby was born, I did a mix of contract work for various ecological companies, everything from feral cat surveys in Ipswich to fire planning, koala habitat surveys for developers. And it really reaffirmed my goal, which was that I didn't really want to work for government or consultants long term. I wanted to work for a big conservation charity because that's where I feel my effort is best placed and my ethics align. So I was doing that work part-time and with no real kind of goal about which organization I wanted to work for. But it was, keeping a bit of money coming in and keeping me satisfied, but I was searching for something more. And then I saw the current job that I have advertised, which is the Special Wildlife Reserve Project Officer. So that's a role that was advertised by Bush Heritage, and it's a very specific role dealing with protecting land in Queensland. So protecting private protected areas in perpetuity, removing the threats of mining and logging and commercial grazing, which is something equivalent to a national park. And I saw that advertised and I thought, wow, that sounds like my dream job. And so I called up the person who was listed as the job contact, who is now my current boss. And I had a chat to her and I said, this is my experience and I'm really interested in this job. But I can only do 4 days a week in my current capacity. I know that it's advertised as full-time, but I can only do 4 days a week. And she said, that's fine, apply anyway. And I did, and I got the job. And it's been absolutely wonderful. So lessons there is to, always reach out and put yourself out there and make contact with people, because if you can be a voice at the other end of the phone, it is much more valuable than just being a CV sent in. I'm loving the impact that I'm making here. I'm about to have my second baby soon, so I'm going to figure out all of that again. I might have another crisis moment, but coming back to Bush Heritage and potentially planning for a national role as more states get higher levels of conservation covenanting. I'm hoping to move into that space. But my journey hasn't ended in this area. I want to do more study. I think that potentially enrolling in a Master's of Environmental Law part-time is the next step. And I would encourage you all to keep thinking that just because you've found a job doesn't mean the career path ends. It really is a continuing journey, and I hope to be here for the long haul. But the key things that have helped in my career, just to finalize, linking up with really good quality mentors. I still do this. People are always willing to give you a hand up. And I try to remember this now as I'm in a position to lend a hand, to give others a hand up. Volunteering your time, going above and beyond, and getting field experience. It really sucks, especially now. I did all of this in my career 10 years ago, and we were in a very different economy, and I understand that it's very difficult now to fund that. But, I worked 2 jobs and saved up all my money and worked out how I could do it cheaply. Doing things that you like sounds simple, but that I think is key to having a sustainable career in conservation. And probably the most important, holding on to a work-life balance, because burnout is real, particularly in this passion-driven industry of conservation. Everybody is always willing to do more, volunteer more, work more hours. But if you want to be here for the long haul and you want to make a difference in conservation, you have to set really good boundaries around making sure that you don't do too much and you don't burn out early. So that was all I wanted to say on that. Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you, Felicity. Thank you for sharing your journey as well, and including those crisis moments, which I am sure a lot of our audience can relate to, and I can too. So thank you. We're now going to start our Q&A section. So I really appreciate all the questions that have come through the chat. We have quite a lot there. So we'll try to get through as many as possible. Feel free to keep adding questions to the chat as we go. Okay, first question. Felicity, you slightly touched on this, but I might get some more tips from you first off. What advice do you give to those who are keen to get practical experience, but given the current costs of living constraints, what can someone do?
Yeah, it's really hard. I totally acknowledge that, I think I was in more privileged position than the current graduates are, with the cost of living not being so dreadful when I graduated. I lived in a share house as cheaply as possible. I worked 2 jobs, one completely unrelated to conservation, but paid okay. And I was very passionate about doing some volunteer work. And I found that the most effective way of doing that cheaply was to do it overseas. And I thought that Central America is a very cheap place to live day to day. I'd be able to fund myself to live there for a year based on savings from Australia. And so that's how I decided to do that. So I would recommend, looking around at your options for overseas travel. Now we don't live in the COVID era. There are lots of opportunities in other countries to do conservation-based related field experience. And if money is tight, it might be better looking there.
Thank you, Felicity. Vicky, would you like to touch on that one too? Because you spoke about the importance of getting that practical experience after a degree.
Look, I think one of the benefits today in today's society is that things have changed so much since COVID and those kind of impacts in societies, that there's a little bit more flexibility and room now around opportunities there. So people don't have to do like how my experiences were over 20 years ago of going into a full-time degree. There's the flexibility of part-time options and then being able to do that a little bit around different work kind of basis experiences too, and just even following on from Felicity's last comment there, having those options to then be able to fill up a little bit of time and getting into volunteer opportunities to help further your skill sets and develop yourself professionally is really important.
Thank you, Vicky. Reese, I'm going to throw to you another question. So this is coming from someone who is researching master's degrees, and they're wondering if, in your experience and opinion, are master degrees and or further studies helpful to put oneself in a better position to compete for jobs and to advance their career? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. It's a really good question. It's a tricky one to answer. I think it certainly can't hurt having further qualifications. It depends on exactly what you're trying to get into as well. If there's something quite specific, it might pay to sort of narrow down a broad bachelor's degree or something like that with some further studies. But yeah, that would be my advice. So my recommendation is if you can and you can afford the time and if you can afford the course fees, certainly go forth. The other bit is you don't have to do it straight away. You can go into the workforce for a bit and figure things out, and then go back and further your education if you wish.
Yeah, that's so true. Felicity, I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on that. Have you ever had questions of people asking you whether they think they should do an honours? Like, did you think honours was worth it? Do you get that question at all? What
I
do you
don't
tell
know if
people?
people have asked me that specific question, but in terms of my experience, I think that honours was worth it. I wasn't ready to leave university. I was very frightened of the big world outside because I still didn't know what to do. And what honours gave me that my undergrad degree didn't was a year to really focus on research and be introduced into the academic space and how research works and to get a whole bunch of contacts. And I still know people and I still bump into people at conferences that I did my honours year with, and that was a very long time ago now. So I think the contacts and the exposure to research methodologies made it worth it from my perspective.
Good to know. Thank you, Felicity. Vicky, this one is for you. How did you manage moving away from country? Was it difficult whilst you studied?
Uh, yeah, look, it was definitely challenging being 18 years of age, limited experience, living in one location, growing up in a rural sort of setting as well. One of the things that I can reflect and look back on was that I was fortunate again to have one of the local elders that took me under their wing at the time in living in Albury Wodonga. So I was then sort of taken and brought straight back into community at that particular level. But there were the challenges as well, of course, sadly, I lost both of my grandfathers within the first 12 months. So there was those kind of difficulties to navigate during study, and sorry time is obviously something really important in our communities. But at the same time, I had the full support of family and wider support systems within the universities to come back and to be able to continue my studies at that particular time. So it's one of those things that, if you have good support networks around you, you can navigate a lot of difficult situations. And of course, as I mentioned before, having, the changes that we now see in society where there's not those demands necessarily for people to have to go in, and we have so many different options with, being able to now take cultural leave, sick leave, all of those kind of particular instances, and utilise those systems if you need to navigate, and just know that, sometimes people have to navigate all different types of personal hurdles that come up in life. That's just a part of nature and a part of being human. So as long as you've got those other good networks and support systems in place, it certainly helps you to get through at those particular times. And then even just as a cultural person, I'm just extremely grateful for the Wiradjuri people in that particular community that took me under their wing and helped support me through that particular journey before returning home. And of course, for me, it was making sure that I came home on a regular basis to reconnect with my family and to get that strength as well to go back and have the support from them to keep going because they were certainly happy with the pathway that I'd chosen and saw the merit in what I was trying to achieve.
Thank you. Reese, this one's for you. With your different roles that have taken you to different areas of Australia, did you bring your family with you when you moved out bush?
Um, Initially, it was me traveling solo, but I met my wife at bush, and since then we've travelled together, and we have a little 5-year-old at together now, and we're who's started school this year. So the first couple of years of her life, we were in Broome, and yeah, we did get to go out and travel a little bit. But yeah, initially I flew the roost solo.
Thanks, Reese. Now, this is one for all of you, and maybe I'll go Felicity first, then Vicky, then Reese. How do you find a mentor?
Ooh, well, by being brave. So my experience of this is really one of putting yourself out there. You know, I'm still of a generation that prefers to text or email. I don't want to talk to people in person, but having the guts to call somebody and to approach them and to seem useful and interested and helpful and hardworking is the way that I've found my mentors, and meeting people at conferences, going to not for profits. I think you'll find a lot of the time people are very happy to give you the time, their time to help you if you display all of those qualities. And so, really putting yourself out there, even though it's really tough and no one wants to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Vicky, what about you?
My background, the way I found my mentors was through my networks. So, again, just working with particular individuals, starting to, I suppose, assess some of their particular experiences, their knowledge, their skill sets, aligning myself with that, reaching out, having the conversations, whether they were prepared to help me navigate a professional pathway in my career, and that was, yeah, certainly very valuable. And then the other way that I've found mentors is through training opportunities. So there's a handful of people to this day that I'll still reach out to if I have, particular questions relevant to, it could be leadership, it could be conservation sector, it could be cultural heritage, areas of interest. There's those types of individuals that I was able to identify, and that's only come through years of volunteering. Even at university, there's still a couple of people there that I still touch base with from time to time. They do check-ins, those sorts of things as well. And yeah, I should have mentioned that before. Networks are really important as well in terms of mental development.
Yeah, excellent. And Reese.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like you'll know if someone's going to be a bit of a mentor for you. You'll click. You'll have a connection. There'll be a shared interest. There'll be, and it's usually around a subject matter that you're working on or you're sort of working towards. That's what I found as well. So keeping those broad networks open, not burning bridges, and a lot of my mentors over the years I've worked for, and they're mentors for me today. I'll call them up and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And they'll give me some advice. It may not always be the advice that is necessarily needed at the time, but they help work through challenging problems. Um, but yeah, I've found mentors in different places, either like Felicity said, meeting someone at a conference or a workshop, you spend a bit of time with them and you realize, hey, we've got a bit of a connection here. They're interested in something that I'm interested in. Let's get together and let's keep that contact over the years happening. And some of those relationships we've managed to build, like I said, maintain today, and still touch base every now and again for a hand up or a bit of advice.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Felicity, I'm going to throw this one to you, if I may. How do I get volunteer experience and internships? Where do we find them?
It's hard. Being really persistent, I would say, being kind of annoying and like lots and lots of research and hours spent on the internet, targeting specific organizations. Like when I volunteered at the Nature Conservancy, I just kind of cold called them and said, hey, these are my skills. This is what I really want to do. Have you got any opportunities? With my stuff in Central America, lots of research into tiny not-for-profits that were operating over there, making contact, saying, look, these are my skills. Have you got anything available? And just putting yourself out there. As I said, people are a lot more inclined to help you, particularly if you've had a verbal chat with them over the phone, appear interested and helpful and follow up on things.
Yeah, thank you. This next question's probably my favourite, and I'm going to ask it of all three of you, starting with Reese. What is a project or piece of work you're most proud of?
Well, yeah. Lots of things that I'm really proud of over the years. But the thing that's probably I'm most proud of is probably what I'm doing right now in my job at Bush Heritage. Um, we've managed to build a team, I guess, of fire skilled practitioners all around the country. I think when we started, there was maybe 25, 30 people trained in managing fire. We've got about 74, 75 people trained, ready to go, and we've built our capacity, built our little team up, and in such a short time, for me, I'm really quite proud of what we've achieved within my team, but also organisationally at Bush Heritage. But over the years, there's been so many things that I've looked back on now and just go, wow, yeah, I was so lucky to be part of that. But yeah, it's hard to say.
Hard to pinpoint one. Vicky, what
Yeah.
about you?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to mention two. There was
Okay.
one instance that goes back to my early career with National Parks, so a 5-year staged project which led to the development of a cultural heritage and mapping landscape project quite wide. There were 7 different elder groups at the time that we had to do the consultation with, and we collaborated with a number of other agencies. To this day, one of the things I'm most proud about with that project was that that staged approach enabled a timely response from community to build trust, develop relationships to the point where all of the information that we mapped has now led to the handback of significant landscape features that were identified back at that time, and that was in the early 2000s. So that was a big one. And then the second one I'd like to mention is something that's quite close to my heart here at Bush Heritage is as the Aboriginal Partnership Manager in New South Wales, I work quite closely with Niampa people at Mwonga, and this is where my role crosses over into Reese's team. And we've been supporting the Mwonga community and developed some amazing relationships out there and supporting fire programs. So it's really quite rewarding to see the outcome, the confidence that has been developed, and the relationship that we've now built with the Niampa people. It's something I'm quite happy with.
Thanks for sharing. And Felicity, over to you.
Thank you. And oh my gosh, Reese and Vicky, they're such cool achievements. I think like it's so awesome to work in a field like conservation where you can really see the big achievements that we managed to make. And I think reflecting on what I'm proud of is everything is always to do with teamwork. Nothing I do individually is solo my work. I'm really proud this year that we've managed to get Special Wildlife Reserve protection for Edgbaston Reserve. It's one of our reserves near Longreach in central Queensland. It is the second most biodiverse spring system in the world, behind one in the Yucatan in Mexico. And it was under threat from petroleum extraction, and we've managed to protect it, to remove those threatening processes and to protect that land forever. Working with the Bidjara people and a huge team at Bush Heritage. It's been really amazing, and that happened a couple of months ago. So I'm super proud of that.
Thank you so much for sharing, team. I feel so inspired. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So I'm sorry if we didn't get to your questions. We'll see if we can answer those offline. I want to thank you all for taking part in this event, and hope you've taken something valuable from each of our presenters as they've shared their experiences and career paths. A huge thank you to Reese, Vicky, and Felicity for taking the time out of their very busy schedules to join us today, sharing their experiences from personal and professional lives. We'll be sharing a recording of today in a link form in an email shortly with a brief survey. So I'd love it if as many of you could fill that out as possible. Thank you again and best wishes as you navigate your paths ahead, and have a wonderful day.